do I need to be up there?
Yeah, if you could, just right over here.
Yeah, this laptop doesn't have to face the presenter.
Here, I can put.
And you are live on Facebook and YouTube.
Okay. Hey, Paul. Hey. Just dealing with some issues with lighting and stuff. And then, yeah, I know. It's reversed, which I don't know why they say it like that.
Turn the thing on.
But if somebody else comes in, add them. And then,
It'll be obvious how to add them.
yeah, I'll say admit guest. You have to click twice. If you're recording, I'm just going to let you.
Well, and I just accidentally.
You're talking to him recording.
Sorry, yes, Glenn.
I accidentally just turned the stupid owl off, I think.
So anyhow, they recommend between 20 and 80%, with 50 being really the best
For your life pose you're talking about? For computers?
No, I'm talking just a laptop. So I wouldn't have known it, but this message popped up because it was already at 100%. And I plugged it in and walked off from it. But it's got a thing built in. You can limit it to charged to 60 or 80%.
Like your phone, like iPhone does.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
No, I don't really expect anybody else if they haven't signed in. We'll get started. We'll give them a couple more minutes.
And we get closed captioning too on Facebook. It's closed captioning for us.
Paul wants to cut some pictures, probably for the newsletter. So
Oh, okay.
I'll
Paul, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir, I sure can.
Okay, good. I went to go ride my bike about 3 o'clock, telling Glenn, and then I got out, rode up the hill, and looked off to the west. And I was like, I'm gonna put that off. It looked worse, and then it kind of cleared up. Then the wind came in. And I was like, glad I did.
I'm really thinking, hey, Charlie, on your way back up, steal one of those brownie cookies.
For Glenn.
yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, you could.
We'll go ahead and get started. Somebody else jumps in. They do Yahoo. After Glenn gets his cookie.
After I get my.
We went to Burger King and I had the Hershey pies.
Yeah, and I've been resenting that ever since. So yeah, it's okay. I probably don't need a whole one.
Need a bigger piece than that. I'll take another stab at it.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, well, we'll get started. So we're going to talk about spotting and safety in boat terms. I actually put a disclaimer in this year. I'm going to put it out available on some sources. I'm not a meteorologist, although I've had some training and I've been chasing storms for over 50 years. It's dangerous. Be careful. You're on your own. Any questions about that? Okay, so this is kind of what we're going to go through. Basics of a storm. We're going to go through a series of little clips about, is that a tornado? We're going to talk about preparing for the storm so you know when this might be an issue, watches and warnings. We're going to get through safety tips, some severe thunderstorm hazards and weather spotting, and we'll do a case study. So without talking technical terms, the Coriolis force is not the answer to the question, but why does a bathtub drain like this?
Magic.
That too.
Magic.
Well, it's nature's way of organizing mass conversions. You pull the plug, the water all wants to go down the drain. So the fastest way to get the water down the drain is to create a swirl and a vortex, and that works whether it's going up or down. And we see that all the time in nature. So when we talk about weather generally, we often talk about high pressures and low pressures. So high pressure means the air is sinking towards the ground. Where is that air coming from? It's coming from the upper levels of the atmosphere. It comes down and then it flattens out. That's associated with fair weather because to have clouds, we have to have rising air. So bad foul weather is associated with a low pressure. So what creates a low pressure? Low means it's sucking the air in, but if it's sucking it in, where does it go? There has to be something at the top in the upper level of the atmosphere creating a vent. To create that vacuum, that wants to bring that air in. And then as it tries to localize on that one smaller area, it creates a spin, which is the low filling into that low pressure. Most typically in our hemisphere, the high pressure will spin counter or clockwise, and the low pressure will spin counterclockwise, not absolute, but pretty normal. So what does this look like? Well, we have what's called a mid-latitude cyclone, since we're in the mid-latitudes, about 45 degrees, and surface low pressure with all the air swirling in to fill that's in going up into the upper levels of the atmosphere and venting out. And this is our classic start for a storm system. We have hurricanes, which are also generally low pressure systems, a little more complex. The supercell and tornadoes we're going to talk about. And then real small features like gustnadoes, dust devils, and fire nados. This was in southeast Nebraska just last year, and had just a little gustnado, but look, there's no strong supercell up above that. It's just being driven by a small area of rising air. So what makes severe weather? Three things: temperature, water, and wind. For the temperature, it's heat, and usually some differential heat, somewhere that creates a boundary between hotter and cooler air. And then we have water, the moisture in the air, which we measure with relative humidity or dew point. The dew point's the lowest temperature the air will get and it will become fully saturated. So typically, if you see a dew point of 60, unless the weather changes, the air temperature won't go below that. And that humidity is stored energy, because when that moist air starts to rise, it will evaporate, create what they call latent heat, and will cause it to expand and grow up even more into the atmosphere. And then we have wind. And for what we're looking here is we're looking at changes in speed and changes of direction to create some shear. We actually put those things together. The warmth and moisture create the instability. Now this can be potential instability, where it's all primed and ready to go, but something called a cap is keeping it from actually exploding until later in the day or ever. We have the shear with the wind change, both with direction and speed. And then we have to have some forcing mechanism, something that actually gets those storm clouds to start developing. This is about the most classic setup you can see. So the first thing we have is that the jet stream is taking a big dip. This is called a trough, and this is called a ridge. Now, if you throw a stick on the edge of a fast-moving river, the stick will kind of go to the middle, but it really won't go to the other side. And you can pretty much assess what your weather is going to be like for seasonal conditions, where it's generally colder on the above to the north of the jet stream. It's generally cooler, generally cooler to the north and generally warmer to the south. And that creates a division. But what happens when the jet stream comes down to this trough, it compresses the air at the upper level. So that's not going to do much. But then as it gets out here, there's all that room, and that jet stream starts to spread out, and that creates lower pressure in the atmosphere. And that starts to create a place for air from the surface to rise up. When the air starts to try to blend in that, now it doesn't do it quite as smoothly as a bathtub does because of the differences in the heat and humidity. So we typically have warm, humid air being drawn in from the south. That's a real force for our storm. We have warm, drier air coming in, or cooler, drier air coming in from the north and west, creating a warm front or a dry line, maybe a cold front, and then maybe a warm front. So lots of moisture here, spin, create some lift, and then we'll also have some mid-level winds coming in off the desert that will bring in that warm air that can create a cap. And then also, if you get a little speed max of that wind, that can disrupt that and cause those storms to blow. So those things all start to combine to create our weather system. So when we look at the vertical wind profiles of the shear, that's very important in the type of storms we may get if they were to form. So typically, if you take a garden hose and hold it upright, water goes up, and then what's going to happen to it? It's going to come back on itself, and it's just going to not do much. That's a classic garden variety summertime thunderstorm, where we have a lot of heat, energy, and moisture, but not much shear. Though the storm goes up, rains a little bit, and comes back down. We look at this wind profile, and these barbs are showing the direction the wind is coming from. They aren't a flag. So this is light wind at about 15 knots, 10 plus 5, and no real speed change and no reliable directional change. So you may get enough energy to pop that thunderstorm, but nothing's going to help it to maintain itself. Then we jump over to the right side in the supercell. We see both speed and directional shear. We start off with winds coming out of the southeast. As we go up, they speed up and start to come out of the southwest and maybe even more westerly and faster. So we're getting increase in speed as we go up, and we're getting rotation, and that will create that top that allow that supercell to spin and be very potent and strong. Now, what if we just have the speed shear? Well, that's typically associated with the squall line. There's enough energy to cause those to rise up, and the rain will fall out in front because of the shear coming out here. But without the speed shear, it's not going to rotate. It's just going to create a more linear storm system. So let's look at the classic supercell. So what we have is we have the speed shear at the surface, and that creates a roll-in because of friction on the ground, mid-levels, it's going to go faster, and it creates a roll. And then at some point, we get lift, some forcing mechanism that causes that storm to start to form, and it tilts that rotation up on in. And if it's potent enough, it can go all the way up to the jet stream to where the air is just as cool. We'll get the anvil. So what makes it a supercell is you have rotation all the way up. If you just think of spinning a top, it's hard to knock that top over, even though we have winds coming from multiple directions. Instead of tearing apart, they actually tend to feed into it. We see the overshooting top as the air comes up so fast. Once it hits its same point where it's as cool as it cools as much as that temperature is up there, that's where it typically flattens out, but it will overshoot a little bit just because of the energy. And then we get downstream anvil in the direction of the jet stream. At the base, the part we can see, there's often what we call a rain-free base. More moist air, but it doesn't condense into the cloud until it gets up to a certain level and a temperature. The closer this rain-free base is to the ground, the more likely a supercell is to be tornadic, along with several other features. If you hear the Weather Service, they'll talk about high base storms. Those generally are not going to be tornadic or much less likely. And we'll see why in just a moment. A couple other features as because of that shear, the storm will go up, the rain will fall out in front and create this forward flank downdraft. That will be cool, wet air coming out in front in the form of rain and hail. Now, if I have a small rock, how far can I throw it versus a huge boulder? Small rock, I can throw a lot farther, big boulders less. Same thing with hail. When the hail gets created, the biggest hail will fall closest to the front edge of this forward flank downdraft, and the small hail will go farther ahead. There's a gap here between where a wall cloud may form or a tornado called a vault, and this front edge right here is where you're going to see the largest, most intense hail. One of the big things that helps a supercell turn into a tornado is this rear flank downdraft. In addition to air rising, some of that cool air, as it goes up, gets outside the main part of the mesocyclone and actually wraps around and descends and comes down. And we constantly have this warm, moist air feeding in, typically from the south, into the picture. That rear flank downdraft comes around being cooler, will undercut that warm, moist air, right? Warm air wants to rise. And will actually push that warm, moist air up into the storm and help start that rotation at the very low surface level. A wall cloud is any rotating, persistent lowering below the rain-free base. And then we have a funnel when there is a defined lowering from that, and then a tornado once it actually touches the ground. Or you see visible damage. You can have a flanking line that feeds into that tail cloud, and we'll see a few pictures. And then you may have the squall, the shelf cloud out here in front that you may see approaching. Generally, from the front of the storm, the shelf cloud, the rain, the hail, maybe a gap, and then the tornado. So I said the rain-free base is just this area up until the cloud actually starts to condense the water as it starts rising. When we think about the energy involved in a supercell, they typically go up 30 to 50,000 feet, maybe even a little bit more, 10 miles high. What we're seeing is the tip of the iceberg, anywhere from 1 to 3,000 feet. So when you think of that as being a medical guy, a syringe, when you're drawing all that air up this high, that creates a very strong pull into this lower area. And the closer that cloud base is to the ground, the smaller area all that air has to come from to get up into the mesocyclone, as opposed to when the cloud base is higher and there's a larger surface area for that to occur. So the lower the cloud deck is to the ground, that 1 to 3,000 foot, the more likely it is to, when air feeds into that mesocyclone, to have a tighter spin and rise up into the mesocyclone and create a tornado. So there's parameters they look at of how low that cloud deck is going to be. Now, if we look on for the top down, kind of a schematic, we see that warm, moist air feeding into it, and it kind of creates what you could think of as a warm front. And if you feel warm, moist air to your back, that storm is going to be ahead of you and maybe a little to your left. We have the mid-level air feeding in. Some of that is going to wrap around this rear flank downdraft, which kind of creates what you might think of as a little bit of a mini cold front. And it's going to push under that warm air and force it into this area with the updraft. You'll have heavy rain and hail just downstream of it. You've got this forward flank downdraft, and then you may get some wraparound hail also. Now, in the Midwest or the Central Plains here, we tend to get more precipitation wrapping around than the supercells like out in the high plains, where they have those isolated supercells that are really gorgeous and really easy to spot, and you see all the classic components. Here we may get some where we can't see as much of what's going on under this. The thing to be watching for when you see a storm rising is those hard cumulus clouds. They look like cauliflowers. They're starting to grow. You see them start to get washed out, that storm is no longer growing. And when a line of storms first starts, you'll see it pop up. And if it's fat and wide, it's got a lot of energy. And if it's tall and skinny and tilted, it's got a lot of shear. It may start with one or both of those, and then pretty soon it'll probably find a dominant cell that starts to rise up. It's kind of wide and squat and continues to go up, and will have that hard, bubbly appearance up until you see it hit the anvil, unless you're right under it. So under that rain-free base, we can have the wall cloud, which is a persistent lowering with rotation. We can have a tail cloud, which feeds into the updraft from the backside of the storm. We have that very important rear flank downdraft that comes in and wraps under. And then we have this area, the inflow or the vault, where you can have the heaviest hail. There may be a little gap of free air under there.
Can I throw in one quick comment,
Yeah.
Joe? You said something there that's important for everybody to realize as well, is persistent. You'll see thunderstorms go through lots of changes. As you're watching them, if it continues to do the same thing for a long period of time, like the wall cloud, that's when you might see a wall cloud form, dissipate, form, dissipate, form, dissipate. That's when you really need to be paying attention to it if it sticks around for a while. Because not everything that a thunderstorm does is dangerous, but if it persists for a long period of time, that's when you really need to be paying attention.
We've got several examples we'll be looking at. So first thing is just kind of understand what we're looking for. This is a single supercell I've got about 4 different views from that went through northern Grundy County when you had the little tornado up there in 2012, I think it was. So here we are looking to the northeast behind the storm. The storm is moving to the north and east. We're back behind it. We've got warm surface winds coming in from the south. We have the rear flank downdraft, which creates a little bit of what we call a clear slot. This is all rain-free base under here. So with that clear slot, it creates what you might think of as a big comma with a comma head. You'll typically find a wall cloud and or tornado forming at the head of that comma. That clear slot is a rear flank downdraft coming down, undercutting that surface flow and pushing it up. Now, if the clear slot really wraps around, you may see something like this on a radar, which pretty much tells you there's probably a tornado. But a lot of times you will not see something this pronounced. Now the other thing is, notice that there's not a lot of contrast here because the forward flank downdraft is behind that storm relative to me, right? Well, that's why chasers and people that want to photograph storms don't like being behind them, besides that they can get behind because they don't have the contrast. Now here, I've moved to the north of the storm and I'm looking basically across it. So in this picture is moving from my right to my left. I'm basically looking south-southeast. We definitely have a persistent lowering. We've got a rain-free base and we've got a tail cloud. Now I don't see that clear slot I saw. It may be there, it may not, but it may just be on the other side of this cloud. So depending on your position, you may or may not see that. Now I've moved back behind it, but it's starting to get dark. And again, we've lost contrast. But notice this comma head comes clear around here. That lowering is not as pronounced now, right? And it almost looks like there might be another lowering here. What is happening, and I'll show you some graphics later, is that that rear flank downdraft has actually cut the inflow off to this part of the updraft and maybe creating a new one over here. You think of those fronts shifting a little bit, and I'll show you a few other pictures. So you do have to remember they're very dynamic. And now I'm to the southeast of the storm, looking back to the northwest. Again, it's moving now from my left to my right, coming this way. We have a very defined lowering. I can't see that it's rotating in this picture. Got a lot of contrast because there's no storm behind it. Now this time we don't see a clear slot. It may be that it doesn't exist, or that it may be just this little cove up here. So a lot of different appearances. So scuds are stratocumulus under the deck, which are just clouds that rise up. SLC are scary looking clouds. They can move up, down, rotate. They can have a whole lot of appearances. But notice that there's not a persistent feature. We see some stuff rising up into the cloud, but not necessarily anything that's persistent.
We'll step through a couple of examples to show you the difference between a funnel cloud and a tornado versus scud. These are the questions that you can ask yourself as you're spotting to be able to tell the difference. The first question is this part of a supercell? Now you may not be able to tell that in real time, but you will know if it's a severe weather day, perhaps there's a watch out. You will know if severe weather is expected. The next question to ask is if the feature is persistent and rotating. If it's changing frequently, moving up and down, but not maintaining its shape or rotating, it's probably not a funnel or tornado. And then the last question is, do you see a debris cloud or is it touching the surface? In this case, it was not a severe weather day. This is not a supercell or a type of storm that would produce severe weather. And the features were not persistent and rotating. You did see some low-hanging clouds, but they were pretty ragged looking and didn't look like they were rotating. So even though at times it looked like they were touching the surface, it fails the first two tests, and we're probably just looking at scud. In this example, it actually was a severe weather day, and there was a severe weather watch out at the time. It's hard to tell without seeing it in motion, but this feature was persistent and rotating, and you can see kind of that smooth appearance to the funnel. Now it's hard to tell if there's a debris cloud or it's touching the surface. It doesn't look like it's extending all the way to the ground, but it's difficult to see the base, so we're not exactly sure if this is a funnel cloud versus a tornado. Well, let's step forward in real time and see what happens with this feature. You can actually see the tornado condense down to the ground very quickly, and you know that this actually was in connection with the surface and is a tornado. In this last example, sometimes it's a little more clear cut. This was part of a supercell. It was a severe weather day. It was persistent and rotating, and it's very clearly in connection with the surface. So this is a clear-cut example of what a tornado could look like.
So we're going to look at a few other examples using the same set of parameters. Several years back, I was just down in southwest Livingston County watching this definite supercell, which had really a good appearance on radar with a couplet. And I had this persistent lower, so it was definitely persistent. I could not identify rotation, and I watched it for 10 or 15 minutes. So I told Glenn, persistent lowering, but it's not rotating. That officially makes it not a wall cloud. Can't say it's not, but I can only report what I see. And there's certainly no debris touching the surface, but it was pretty impressive. Now here's one. When you're watching for rotation, watch the back side and compare it to the front side. The back side should move right to left, and the front side should move left to right. This one is very clearly rotating, very consistent, persistent rotation. We see a little bit of a rain and or hail shaft around the back, maybe a little bit of a clear slot feeding right into there. This happened to be the same day as the Joplin tornado. And as you can see, it just continues to wrap around, maybe even get a little more prominent of a what might be a funnel developing there, but there's nothing that would indicate that at this point. If you go play that fast, that's why I record a lot of videos. To go back, I can play them faster and you can see features that you can't see in real time. Same storm, just a little bit later. I was west of Waverly here. It's 23 to go south, and very clearly persistent lowering wall cloud with a funnel. Can't see if there's anything touching the ground. Remember, the tornado doesn't always have to be fully condensed to the ground. You just have to see a funnel with debris on the ground, and that qualifies as a tornado.
Still debris. Have a tree down on 24 highway.
Now look at the loss of contrast. A little better in real life, but it's right in here. So definitely got a funnel, but we have debris, right? That makes it a tornado. And that's right one in the
just on the west side of Waverly.
A little better view there.
It's actually in Waverly now. I'm entering the west edge. It's about 200, 300 yards ahead of me. Over Waverly, all the damage is fairly mild at this point. A limited tree limbs that I can tell.
Still seeing a lot of leaves and limbs. Nothing really significant.
So was that, you think that was from the tornado or from hail? And
That was a tornado because nothing had gone by there yet.
because the way those little ones looked there towards the
Yeah.
end, when I was down there by Minden
Mm-hmm.
a year or so ago, that's what it looked like.
Well, hail could do that too, but
That's why I
when
did.
you have the more prominent damage here,
Well,
those
yeah.
leaves very well got carried that far. Luckily, I mean, this went right over Waverly and just didn't lift it up. It actually put down another tornado farther to the east. I can't remember if it's in Sheraton County or wherever Moberly is, and took out a mobile home and injured a couple people there. So fits all the parameters. So that's a tornado. I was in southern Grundy County. I'll show you where I was. Looking due west, very clear. There was persistent lowering. Again, I couldn't see it rotate. I thought maybe it was getting undercut from those, but it was part of a supercell. It was definitely persistent. So the term I like to use is persistent lowering. You can say that's what it looks like without calling it a wall cloud if you don't actually see the rotations. And I did. But when I got home, so here's 65. This is Route Z, my little APRS track. Stopped here, looking west. That's the radar presentation. This is the storm relative velocity, which shows shear. Here I am, and there's that pretty strong coupling. So there's definitely rotation, at least at the level that the radar could see, but it didn't do anything else. So probably was a wall cloud. Again, I couldn't call it that because it didn't see it. So pretty much everything people say about tornadoes, not doing this or not doing that, is usually categorically false. Remember, 30 to 50,000 foot tall, drawing up something this small on that scale really has minimal effect. Maybe if it goes across some water, it might cool it just for a little bit and disrupt the tornado, but it's not disrupting the supercell. So they don't hit big cities. Well, we know they do. Just statistically, the average life cycle and size of a tornado covers a very small geographical area compared to what the watch might be set out for. Mobile homes are obviously just more susceptible than other more prominent structures. So you're not really protected by anything geographically from a tornado. In fact, here's a great picture of one at 8,000 foot elevation.
You didn't put in the picture of the tornado crossing the frozen lake?
Well, I don't know if it actually crossed the lake or was just behind it. Yes, they had a big tornado in St. Joseph, Michigan, about 2 weeks ago, and people who lived on the lake were taking a picture, videoing the tornado, and the lake was still frozen over. So I don't know. I wanted to see if it passed, but I couldn't. What we often see for our tornadoes around here are small, I'm going to use the term small tornadoes because they almost always are, associated with squall lines. And their fancy name for these are quasi-linear convective systems. So they're squall lines, but they have some embedded supercells in them. So what makes them look this way is, first of all, there's low reflectivity behind it. So they aren't real deep. And what that gives you is strong downdraft winds behind it. There's also low reflectivity or ahead of it, where the updrafts go into the storms. If you see a bowing segment here where it's real strong, not like up here where it's soft, but real strong with a curve, that's a gust pushing out, and that bow echo will have very intense winds associated with it. Almost assuredly will have a thunderstorm warning on it. When you see little notches in here, in those, that's where you're most likely to see the tornadoes. And they had one pass through northern Johnson County about 3 weeks ago. They categorized it as an EF0 or 1.
EF1, I think.
But it was persistent for 7 miles. And I found about it because it passed just north of where my mother-in-law lived, and I got her tornado warning. And it was a QLCS tornado. So peak winds of 75 miles an hour. Okay, that's a bad thunderstorm. And even more localized than a bad thunderstorm. So one of the problems is that we're so good, the radar is so good at picking up these little tornadoes that we used to never know about, that we get a tornado warning. But how fast are these storm lines moving for a squall line? 50, 60 miles an hour perhaps? Well, about the time it takes everybody to process a tornado warning, it's already either dissipated or it's gone to a new area. So I think do you know there's a discussion in the Weather Service about continuing squall line tornadoes?
A lot of offices have switched to doing the tornado possible tags.
Which we'll see in just a little bit.
One big problem in our area is these tornadoes are small and relatively low. So up here, the QLCS tornadoes, they're never going to see them on radar. They're extremely difficult to warn on up here because they're so shallow, they can't detect them on radar.
And we'll look at radar stats here as well. So, yeah, it's almost a question if it's worth kicking out these tornado winds. However, they did have one in eastern Jackson County about 4 years ago that was an EF3, and it was a nighttime tornado because a lot of these squall lines blow through after dark. So, kind of know what we're looking for. Well, let's talk about how we know when it's time to start watching. Well, the first thing is just in your preparation. If you watch TV or broadcast radio, they'll talk about the weather. If you want detailed information, you can go to the Weather Forecast Office. They have a text product called the Hazardous Weather Outlook. Very succinct, very short, and many of them will finish up with a spotter activation statement saying spotter activation not likely, may be needed, or likely. So it gives you a real fast clue. The best place to go, though, is to have their local situation report, which is a graphical page, and they have text, they have timing of events, has a lot more detail. The other place to look is the Storm Prediction Center. They have the convective outlooks or the severe storm outlooks. They have them from days 1 through 3. Day 1 is today, day 2 is tomorrow, and day 3 is the day after. So we're under a moderate risk today, I think, way off to the
Enhanced.
east. There's one out there. So the risks are general thunderstorms in the light green up to the high risk, which is a purple color. On the days 1 and 2, there will be 3 other tabs on that page that will break out the individual risks of tornadoes, wind, and hail. This is an example off their page of the tornado risk, and the tornado risks are probabilities, the likelihood of a tornado within 25 miles of a point. Now, how many of you watch the Weather Channel? Nobody. Wow. Okay. When they do their tornado risk, it's the risk of a tornado within 50 miles of a point. So that's not just twice the area, that's about 3 times the area. So their numbers are going to be higher, and they use their 1 to 10 scale. So while they may say 10%, the Weather Service or the Weather Channel may say 20 or 30% because they're putting that risk over a larger area. So this is the likelihood of tornado occurring within 25 miles of the point. Just this month, they added another feature that says if a tornado were to form, how intense is it going to be on a scale of 1 to 3? And the 3 with the double crosshatch is the most intense. You'll see now a lot of the 1s and some 2s. I don't know if we've seen a 3 yet.
Not yet.
If we did, I missed it. If you see your area with the purple with a double crosshatch, that's a super high risk day. And what they're trying to define, and they call it a conditional intensity guidance. And they're trying to say what's the likelihood at EF3s, EF4s, compared to just EF1 and 2. So when it gets closer to time, we may get a watches and warnings. A lot of people have issues trying to remember what they are. A watch is issued when conditions are favorable for the event to occur in the future, that normally hours ahead, and it's over a large area. So these are all issued by the Storm Prediction Center in conjunction with the offices, local weather offices, because they usually cover more than one weather service office. It's time to take your preparatory steps. Make sure you have equipment. You know where your family is. A warning is when the event is actually occurring is for a very defined area. You may have minutes to moments of notice. I mean, typically we get notice that storm's moving here, right? But that storm had to form someplace. And they may not have enough radar information to put out a warning until, boom, it's already on the ground. So you have to take those really seriously. They have what we call storm-based polygon warnings, which are more defined geographically that we'll look at in just a moment for tornadoes, severe thunderstorms, and flash floods. These create a more specific risk area than just geopolitical boundaries. The problem is, how do you verbally describe a polygon warning compared to Livingston County's under a tornado warning? So this is what the storm-based warnings look like. Here are a line of supercells with 3 separate tornado warnings. Under the county-based warnings where they alert the whole county for the area that they're looking at, they'd have 8 counties and 1 million people in the warning. But when we break it down to just the polygon with the storm-based warning, there is usually a wider end as it goes down because of uncertainty. And then the length of this will be relative to the anticipated speed. So a faster storm would be a little longer, and they'll take that into consideration. But when they do this, we now have 70% geographically less area and almost 2/3 fewer people in a warning. That's great, right? But how do you communicate to the people in this county who have this tornado warning, but also that tornado warning, but they're not in a warning at all? It's very difficult. And so we don't have, I don't know if any, like weather radio doesn't do that. They are starting to do some partial county warnings, but those must be in like geographically really large counties, mostly out in the west that I've seen. No weather radio does this. You can buy a few services, and your phone with a national warning system should be pretty accurate for getting you a tornado alert or a flash flood alert for the area where you stand. I have a service called Weather Call, and it's very inexpensive. And I pay for an account for me, for my daughter, and my mother-in-law when my mom was alive. You can set how you want the alerts, but it only pertains to that address. So the polygon, the address for that person has to be in it. Now, those are fixed locations, but they also have one for your phone. But frankly, I think your phone now is so good, I wouldn't pay for one for a phone personally.
One other thing on there that I did want to throw out too, social scientists have determined the vast majority of the population in the United States cannot identify where they live on a map. So make sure you know how to read a map so you know where you live. So I know everybody can go, oh, I live in Grundy County. If I handed you a map of Missouri that had no county labels on it, could you tell me where Grundy County is? No. But the vast majority of Americans cannot do that. So learn how to read a map. If you've got friends, make sure they know how to read a map, because when the guys on television showing, hey, there's a big storm moving through here, if they don't know where they are, that doesn't do them any good.
So when I worked at Truman Medical Center, I actually set up our tornado warning protocol. Now, that was a hospital with all our hospitals combined, all our employees, not all on duty. We've got a population of about 10,000. But just think about a hospital. When you want to move somebody for a tornado warning, it better work. So Truman Medical Center downtown, it's in the far northwest corner of Jackson County. And Truman Medical Center Lakewood's right about in the middle. So I got a piece of software that was available at the time. Would pop up, they'd get a nice banner, and would print it off as well, so they would know where the tornado was, and they could see the polygon. And the policy said, if the hospital where you know where it is based on that map is in it or even close to it, you do a tornado warning. But if it's clearly not, you don't need to. Well, that's great, but if you'd walk down the hall, and this was 2005, 2010 when I was doing this. You walk down the halls at 3 o'clock, every TV was on. They're all on Jerry Springer at the time. But they'd be seeing the TV weather people saying there's a tornado warning for Jackson County. Well, why aren't you evacuating? Why aren't you doing it? So we have to do a lot of staff education that we're making educated, knowledgeable decisions on whether we put a tornado warning out and start moving people because there's considerable risk. So understanding where you are relative to those polygons is really good because, as I said, only a few sources actually can do that for you electronically. So what are the summertime severe weather warnings? Severe thunderstorm, tornadoes, and flash flood. The two parameters for a severe thunderstorm are wind gusts over 58 miles per hour. That's because it's 50 knots. And or hail over or equal to 1 inch in diameter. Tornadoes, either Doppler indicated rotation or confirmed reports of a tornado. And flash floods are 6 or more inches of flowing water over a roadway where you don't normally expect it, or rapid rise in water that's a threat to life and property. Now, these are the criteria for warnings. They still need sub-severe information most of the time because that helps them grade the information they're getting to know what the storm is actually doing. But this is what they take to issue the warnings. Now we're going to look at what those warnings actually look like when they come out. And to try to overcome some of the social lack of response to warnings, they've gone to the what they call impact-based warning. There are 3 components: the hazard, the source, and the impact. First of all, what's a hazard? We've got a tornado, hail of a certain size, wind over a certain speed, and a flash flood. And they may throw in a PDS tag, which stands for particularly dangerous situation. The source, is it observed, confirmed, or radar indicated? I haven't found exactly what observed or confirmed means in that regard on any of the Weather Service websites, but I'm going to say 1 report is observed, 2 or more reports or sources is confirmed. So
The
maybe
confirmed
radar
could
indicated.
be like TDS on the tornado would be confirmed.
Well, that's radar confirmed, and that's but one.
But it'll
when they
just say
a
confirmed.
tornado. I think that means they're using 2 sources, maybe a radar plus a visual versus observed, but they'll both be there. Take it as a real tornado, and then they'll say what the impact is. They'll have a description, maybe with a tag, and the impacts are none, considerable, catastrophic. If it's catastrophic, you'll probably have weather alert activation. And the one thing in the severe, as Glenn mentioned, is you can also have a tornado possible tag. And that's not uncommon in major supercell days where they aren't quite sure, cells farther away from the radar where they see higher, as we'll see in just a second, or in the squall line forms. So this is what one of those looks like. We've got a large and extremely dangerous tornado, particularly dangerous situation, hazard, source, impact. Hazard, damaging tornado. Source, emergency management, confirmed tornado. I assume confirmed because they either really trust them or they have some additional sources. Impact, your life-threatening situation. And then they summarize again at the bottom, tornado observed. See, it says observed versus confirmed. Damage threat considerable, hail less than 0.75 inches. So how do you get your warning? That's the important thing. You obviously have to. Cell phones with the wireless emergency alerts are really, really good now, and they're getting better with the accuracy in narrowing those down. Most of these come out over a network, and ideally, you'd like to know if you're getting a storm base versus a county level warning. Now, they will put out a county level warning that say this is affecting southeastern Livingston County. But if you have a weather radio set to Livingston County, if you live clear in the northwest corner by Poozy, it's going to go off if the tornado is going through Sumner. I actually saw that right after we moved here. And the other thing is, how will you get your warning when you're asleep? And I really recommend having two sources with different technology. So I still like weather radios, especially when I'm asleep.
One thing to add on the wireless emergency alerts, that is based on the coverage of the tower, not where you are. So in the rural areas where there's one tower covering many miles, if the tornado warning clips the southeast corner of the tower's coverage area and you live 10 miles northwest of the tower, you're still going to get it even though the polygon is nowhere near you. So always good to have two sources to verify, and always err on the side of caution. If you get a tornado warning pop up on your phone and you're not sure, take your safety precautions. Worst case scenario, you're going to be in your scaredy hole for 10 or 15 minutes and nothing's going to happen to you.
So we have tornado sirens here in Chillicothe that go off. They have the verbal audio. How often do they go off? Are they still going off while the tornado is going on, or is it because there's a new one? When they had the Joplin tornado, they had an initial tornado warning for a cell that passed slightly to the north. Then they set them off again, what turned out to be the monster tornado that came through Joplin, which a lot of people thought that was still the same warning sirens going off for the previous one. Some will set them off one time, and then that's it. That's your warning. You're to follow up. So the question is, how do you know when the threat is over? Because we know, like Joplin, you can have training storms where you get one after the other. That's where I really think broadcast radio is the single best thing. And that's one of the things I love about Bofongs. Okay, I don't have it tuned to radio station, but you can get FM radio right on your Bofong, and it will still cut back in if the repeater, somebody keys up on the repeater. So, and when I first got that, that's an extended battery. When I first got my first Bofong, I ran it on FM with the battery, a brand new battery. But that thing went with a standard battery for 24 hours with the volume up. I was really impressed. But I think this is going to be answered. If we have a disaster like Joplin, where's water going to be? Where are your sources to go find FEMA to file your report if they're around? Where do you get that information when the cell towers have all been destroyed? I think broadcast radio is going to be your answer. And then you just have to understand the accuracy of whatever source you have, especially if you're using social media. So let's get into storm chasing and spotting. There's 4 aspects of this: awareness, communications, escape routes, and safety zones. Well, why do we even need weather spotters? They need ground truth information. The radar shoots the lowest beam at a half a degree above the horizon, plus the horizon curve, so that gap spreads farther out. So at Bramer, the lowest you can see is 4,500 feet. We're over 6,000 feet. Now, we said the best tornadoes, that cloud deck is 1,000 to 3,000 foot, so that good circulation is in the very low part that would actually demonstrate a tornadic circulation. And if you're a mile in, you're at 12,000 foot. The other radars are Des Moines, besides Kansas City, maybe the Quad Cities, St. Louis if you're way off to the east, or Omaha if you're to the north and west. There is funding to get one in Novinger, northeast of Macon. If that comes to fruition, what type of radar and how long that takes, I don't know. And Missouri has our MU has one that's online occasionally. It's the X
band in Columbia,
which is high definition but shorter range.
Brand new upgraded one too, extended range, and so
good. So what are we looking for? We're worried about wind, hail, lightning, and flood. Now, I said we have severe thunderstorm warnings, which is wind and hail. We have tornadoes, and we have flash flood. Lightning is not a reportable event per se. It doesn't fit in any of the parameters, but if lightning is causing damage or injuries, they'll want to know about that. However, vertical cloud-to-ground lightning tells you where the more intense part of a cell is, so it's certainly worth it as an observational tool on the intensity of a storm. We can have squall lines, which we talked about, fast wind speeds. We can have downbursts. So sometimes those thunderstorms go up, but they come back down. Think of all that weight of that water we think about the vacuum being an intense thunderstorm. What about the squash coming down? Downbursts can be very damaging. And then tornadoes. Tornadoes are bad. Why? Compact with extreme winds and speeds and pressure changes. A little picture from Joplin of how devastating they can be because they're very wide. Hail damage is exponential with its kinetic energy relative to the size. Before 2010, they used 3/4 inch hail as the parameter for a severe thunderstorm warning, and then they moved it up to 1 inch. And look at that, it over doubles the kinetic energy and also reduces the number of warnings overall. So it is a significant increase. There are limited lightning resources. The sources that get those are proprietary. So the National Weather Service doesn't actually have lightning sensors. You can get them on many of the radar apps. And then I have a weather flow or a Tempest weather station that has a lightning sensor in it. And I really like that. It only works relative to my house, but it tells me the lightning is 10 to 15 to 20 miles away, 10 to 15, 5 to 10. So if I'm out playing golf or something, I know what's going on. Also, it's an early alert. If I haven't really been watching the weather, when you start to get cloud to ground lightning, there's a cell. Glenn had that this afternoon, he said. Had a nice big clap of thunder right outside him. And then flash floods. Now, lightning obviously is a dangerous thing, so that's the other reason to know. I ride my bike, and I was on a bike ride in Iowa, and we had a big thunderstorm come through, and we were flatland. I told my friend, even though it wasn't even close, we need to go up to this farmhouse and get under their porch. We'd watch people riding by. So you can get hit. Lightning can travel like up to 10 miles horizontally. How fast does the sound of thunder travel?
Really fast.
Thunder?
Well, really slow.
Relative
to how long it can. 5 seconds per mile.
Yeah, 1,130 feet a second.
Yeah, 1,000 feet, 5,000 a mile. It's about 5 seconds per mile. So a 10-mile away storm would take almost a minute for you to hear the thunder. So if you can't see it, so you got to keep that in mind, that distance is still very critical.
And one quick trivia question for everybody. Out of all these severe weather hazards, as Joe's talked about, which one of them kills the most people every year?
Got that coming up.
Okay, well, fine.
But you can answer now.
Fine. You can wait for Joe's answer, too.
I'm guessing flash floods, but I'm just guessing.
We'll find out.
What do you think? Most deaths.
Probably lightning.
Okay.
We'll find out.
Find out. So flash floods, that scares me as a storm chaser more than anything else. And I call it chasing if I go out of the air. If I'm doing it in this general area, I call it storm spotting because I'm kind of helping protect my community. So we said definition of flash flood is water flowing over a road 6 inches deep. Does that qualify? I'd say it's pretty close. I definitely report it. But I can see the line, right? So not really a problem to pass, correct? Well, that one was that was only 3 minutes later. You can watch this video online and see the whole thing. So I really worry about flash floods. I worry that I'm going to get someplace there's going to be a flash flood. I'm going to stop, turn around, go back, and maybe my exit's now cut off, and the supercell's coming my way. Or I'm just at a point where I'm going to get flooded. In 2018, there was a Greene County Sheriff's deputy that was just from Springfield, was just leaving a call, and hit a flash flood at a little low water crossing, got carried away, drowned, and was found dead in his car. I looked at this, and it's an innocuous little low-level water crossing on a county road. So you just have to be really careful. So what are you trying to protect yourself from? Well, heat is the biggest one, and this is the 30-year average. Tornadoes and floods. Lightning is actually one of the low ones, probably just because the area coverage of lightning is so small. And hopefully after the first lightning strike, people are smart enough to get away. I say that, though, when my daughter was playing softball as a kid, we were down in a valley in Lee Summit, and I saw lightning. I saw a couple of vertical bolts. I went down and I told her coach, these are 10-year-old kids. They don't need to be playing. It's nighttime. I said, there's lightning. I'm taking Emily. You guys should call the game. Well, he didn't have the chutzpah to do it. So we went and got in the car, and not until the storm actually hit did they call the game. Just put all those kids at risk. Couldn't believe it. So when it first started chasing, you could see what you could see and get weather reports from National Weather Service on the weather radio, and that was about as good as you could get. Now we can see through the dark from anywhere, any phone or computer anymore, with a whole bunch of apps. The one thing is they're all internet based, or cell phone based through the internet. So you've got to have the ability to get that. National Weather Service has their own radar. Well, it's all their radar. They have their own site to visibly see it. And they do have the storm-based warnings plotted on them. Number of subscription services, each one's got its pluses and minuses. GR Level 3 is probably the more technical one. It's really good. There are a lot of add-ins, but the add-ins, you have to know what you're doing to get them. It loads on a PC, and there's only a one-time fee for it, and you're good. I use one called WeatherTap also. That's the first one I got because it's cloud-based. So I could go to any computer, and particularly when I was on call at Truman, I was watching storms for family, friends, or even for the hospital. I could log on and access WeatherTap, and they've got a whole bunch. Theirs is all, you can click and add in all these layers and unclick to get them off. It's built into the software. It's internet-based, and it does have a recurring annual fee, so you'd have to want that. Frankly, Radar Scope, either for smartphone or PC, is a fantastic one. It's got there are a couple different layers of membership you can buy that get you different features, but it's really good because it's really easy to see. The one thing is, when I first started chasing, I'm running WeatherTap because I can use their national view, which shows the fronts. I can watch dew points, and it's got very good road mapping on it. Most of these other ones, the road maps are underneath, and they aren't very robust. When I get close, I'm on Radar Scope. One of the problems I had, though, is I run that little computer in my truck when I'm chasing, and Radar Scope Windows doesn't anymore have any GPS location. I actually found a $12 GPS USB plug, put it in, loaded their software. Okay, it worked really well, but Windows couldn't see it. So I messed around for like 2 weeks, but I finally found an intermediate piece of software, and now my location pops up on Radar Scope or WeatherTap, so I can actually see where I am relative to the storm. So when I was trying to chase and kind of have to guess where I was on the map relative to the storm in places I wasn't as familiar, it was really frustrating. There's another one called Radar Omega, which I know has a lot of features. I know very little bit about it, and I'm sure there's some others. So a lot of options for weather radio or radar. The important thing to remember when you're watching radar is it's historical information. In their storm mode, it has to go around 360 degrees at several different levels, process that information, get it out to the internet, and get populated in a form that you can view. And that takes 5 or 6 minutes. So it could be 6 minutes old for a storm move in just a very modest 30 miles an hour. That storm is 3 miles away from where you thought that circulation or the bad part of the storm was. So always remember that is old data, and the closer you are to a serious part of a storm, the more important that becomes. So let's just take a quick look kind of what these different ones look like. This is National Weather Service, GR Level 3, and WeatherTap. All the exact same storm at the exact same time, but they have quite a bit different look. And Weather Service is always more pixelated. It just doesn't have the degree of definition. Now, mind you, all three of them are getting this information from the Weather Service, their information. The GR Level 3 has the polygon. You can clearly see the road. They have a hail indicator, and these horizontal lines are storm tracks. Hey, Josh, based on the storm speed, each one of these hash marks, or in the case of my WeatherTap, each of the dots represents a 15-minute speed frame. And then you can adjust the filtering, so like how intense the storm has to be, or the reflectivity, as this is called, has to be in order to show up. There are some options there. So each one's got some different advantages. One of the things I liked about WeatherTap is we see a whole bunch of cells. This is St. Louis. My friend Rob lives in Webster Grove. They got a tornado warning going up there. The storm reports is clicked on. So these are wind, wall clouds, funnel reports as that storm moved along. But I was interested in this cell that just popped up by his house. These cell numbers are assigned by the computer, no big deal. Tells how fast it's moving. Does it have a tornado vortex signature? there's a mesoscale number, which is like this non-numerical number, but gives you an idea of the intensity of the mesocyclone, how intense the hail is expected to be, how tall it is, and it will tell you cities in the path of that storm. That fires up. Now, when a cell first pops up, it may not be as accurate because it may not know exactly the direction that cell is going, but once it gets a little history, it'll do a really good job. Most of these apps have some way to see most of this information on a mature cell. So that's the base reflectivity. Just looks at the intensity of the raindrops or hail. But one thing we want to know for a tornado is their rotation. And so the radar uses what's called the Doppler shift or storm relative velocity. So the radar is over here, it's sending out a beam, and the beam comes back. If the raindrops are moving away, it can sense that and it codes them in red. The faster it's going away from the radar, the brighter red. If it's coming back towards the radar, moving that way, it puts it in a green. The faster it's going, the brighter the green. Now, because it can only see if it's going away or coming towards, if the raindrops are moving at a right angle to the beam in either direction, it can't see it. It's a zero, nothing there. But in nature, the only way we can get really fast outbound returns and really fast inbound returns very close to each other is if that part of the storm is actually rotating. And so we call this a shear couplet. We have one here, very bright red, very bright green, very bright green, and very bright red. And a lot of these apps will put a marker on that for you to help bring it up, but you can watch it yourself. So we call this a shear couplet. Helps us identify low-level rotation. But again, as Glenn mentioned before, when we looked at those numbers, out here, they can't see very low. And so that really has to get up into the storm, and normally does for a real prominent supercell. So this may be the start of what they do a tornado, radar indicated tornado warning. So we see a shear vector associated with all the other information. We think there could be a tornado there and issue a tornado warning. Then now the storm relative velocity, if you're using one of these apps, watch, because there's also a base velocity. The storm relative velocity takes into account that the storm is moving. And so if the storm is moving 30 miles an hour and this shear vector is 30, this actually isn't really moving. It kind of does this loop to loop, but that takes it out. But just know there's that other option of base velocity. You don't want that in a tornadic storm supercell weather. You want storm relative velocity. Now, both the reflectivity and the storm relative velocity, they're just horizontal waves that are sent out, just like our radio antennas, horizontally polarized. They also send out a vertically polarized wave, and they can compare the returns on those. And what they're looking for is dissimilarity between the vertical and horizontally polarized to get a now three-dimensional, two-dimensional at one given point piece of information. Now, you'd agree if you threw a piece of lumber in the air, it's going to be taller one way than it is the other way, right? As opposed to raindrops and hail, which tend to be pretty much same height, same width. So as the difference, and it doesn't matter what's taller than wide or wider than tall, as that ratio gets less than 8, that tends to be what they call positive correlation coefficient. We see that here is a very bright area, and notice that it's co-located with the shear vector. That is debris being lofted by a tornado on the ground. That's confirming that that shear vector is not just a radar indicated tornado. It is now a radar confirmed tornado, with or without somebody else seeing it. So that's the difference where they come up with those two. And most of these radar apps, you can see both of these pulling them up on the app. Let's take about a 5-minute break. If anybody needs to go to the bathroom, you're good to go. We're good to go? Okay. So communication. It's like Where's Waldo? You got to have some sort of personal accountability system if you're out and about. Who knows where you are, and how do we frequently update keeping track of it? Well, we obviously have radio or a voice. You can use Zello, which is like a walkie-talkie app for people that don't have it. A lot of firefighters have an app called Active 911, which not only gets their dispatch, but also shows their location. Spotter Network is a separate service that has variability in a number of things, but you can report things through the Spotter Network app to the Weather Service. You have to take a test to show some level of competence to get on Spotter Network, but you can post that like through Radar Scope and some other apps. APRS I run all the time because it shows location. I usually use the radio base, but if I'm storm chasing, I often go ahead and go through the internet because it will make sure I fill in the gaps. I think a picture is worth 1,000 words with APRS when you have a map, and there's just so much information you can see besides having your location posted. And then otherwise, just Life 360. So my wife always knows where I am. She's not going to get on APRS.fi. She can get on Life 360 and know where I am at any time.
And one important, I do want to emphasize, is, as he said, that the personal accountability. If you are going out for checking storms, going out to go out post-storm, pre-storm, during the storm, please make sure you're being in contact with somebody. If we are running the net, check in on the net, find out where we need you to go, find out where we don't need you to go. Because as Joe has talked about here before too, we may have training storms. We may have a supercell come through. You may go out and do damage assessments for us behind that and not realize there's a squall line about to blow through. So that's why it's very important that you maintain contact with net control or somebody. You know, Joe does it when he's out storm chasing. Hey, can you guys keep an eye on it? So we keep the big picture for him while he's focused on that individual storm. So make sure I cannot emphasize how important enough that is.
And when I'm chasing, even if it's out of the air, I'm reporting what I see on the net somewhere, if I can find one. So what do we want to do? We want to tell the National Weather Service a time, the event that you saw, and the location. Time best in clock time, because as you report something, it gets reported to somebody else, which gets passed to somebody else. You say, well, it just happened 5 minutes ago. Well, that could be 15 minutes. And when storm's moving, that information could be very far behind reality. The 3 C's, clear, concise, and consistent. So we just want to get our information out and move along, especially if there's a lot of information to report. The severe criteria, again, are tornado, funnel cloud, or persistent rotating wall cloud, winds greater than 58, hail greater than inch, and flash flooding. But they often need sub-severe reports relative to what's going on to help them get the actual full-scale picture. But we don't need to report in the rain that's starting at my house when we have active tornado warnings going on. So it has to be relative and appropriate for the current situation. Well, one of the other things to be safe is to have escape routes. So you have to have good situational awareness. So this is the May 4th, 1999 Bridge Creek, Moore, Oklahoma tornado. Oklahoma City's right here. Notice a real pronounced hook echo, right? Clearly a tornadic supercell. But you have to know what direction that's going. Generally, they head roughly to the north and east. But one thing we have to watch for is right-moving storms. A storm that moves to the right relative to the direction of all the other cells is a very strong supercell because it's feeding into that real warm air. But what's the other thing you have to worry about? If you're back here spotting a safe spot behind it, what's back here? Another cell with maybe another tornado. So back when I chased, originally back in the 90s, I didn't have radar. So I really had to keep an eye out for just what it looked like behind me. This particular day, I was chasing this cell right here. This is the Kansas border. This one went straight across. It was a right mover relative to the others, which went up into Kansas. And typically, say in a line of storms, the southern one is probably going to be the strongest, the tail end Charlie, because it's unobstructed. But guess what? This one went all the way across, looked great the whole time. 2 storms broke off and went up through Wichita and caused F4 damage up there that evening. And I wasn't there. When I drove on the turnpike to come back to Kansas City, I grew up just right about here. So familiar with that. And driving on the turnpike up to Wichita, southern end was black, pitch black. All the power's out because of the tornado. So some of those things don't always hold true. But you got to watch for a back building. You got to know the direction and the speed. Then you got to decide about darkness. Generally, I don't chase after dark. I will spot more locally after dark because I think I'm trying to contribute to local information, and I'm a little more familiar with the road. This is my APRS view. This is state of Kansas, the Kansas border right here, interstate. This is me leaving. I'm going north. I'm bugged out. It's about 8 o'clock at this time. This is a severe thunderstorm that had just crossed in. I was sitting right here at the corner of Hodgman and Edwards County, a little town called Offerell, on May 4th, 2007. I had driven from Kansas City. I thought this was a place to be. It just, from the models that I could see, and this was before we had high resolution stuff, I just thought that was the right place. I'm sitting here watching this, and looks what's going on up in northern Kansas. Tornadoes, or at least warnings. I thought I blew it. Well, I saw the cell come across the border about 8 o'clock. It was getting dark, and it's like, okay, I'm 50 miles away. Can I come across and get ahead of it? But what if it starts really building up ahead? Can I get around behind it? And by then it's going to be 9 o'clock. And I don't know the roads that well. I bugged out and went home. That turned out to be the Greensburg, Kansas tornado right there. I set up 25 miles away from it, but just it happened a little later at night, and I didn't think it was safe for me to stay there. Listen to it on KFDI AM radio out of Wichita as they were reporting it. Also, there's 3 general types of supercells. We have the low precipitation, where the upper winds really push that precipitation away from the updraft, so you don't get that wet rear flank downdraft. See those out in the high plains a little more. Have a classic, which may have some rain in that rear flank downdraft as well as the forward flank downdraft. And then around here, we tend to see the high precipitation supercells, which means the tornado, if it exists, is wrapped up in rain and you'll never see it until it comes across the top of you. So you don't want to get stuck in a big rainstorm. So I am 1 mile west of Utica, looking straight north on off of US 36 at the top of the hill there. So maybe a wall cloud here. Definitely got some rear flank wetness there. Anybody seen persistent rotation? See a tornado? I didn't. And there had a tornado on it, or at least a funnel cloud back by Breckenridge. So here I am looking just 7 miles to the north up to 190, and it had EF1 damage. So there was a tornado there. That's exactly where I was looking at, right at this corner right here, but didn't see a tornado.
Behind the rain.
Yeah, got wrapped around. Had it been on 190, it could have been wrapped up and I could have got run over for it. So what is the danger zone? So here we have comma shape, clear slot, definitely a lowering. Rear flank downdraft, not sure. So how big is this tornado? It's not a tornado, 100 yards wide, 500, half a mile. Oh my God, it's a huge wedge. What do you say?
Can I answer?
Yeah.
I would say that while it may be on the ground, from that still picture, you cannot identify that it's on the
Well,
ground.
I think this is debris, and I think
Yeah,
you're saying that.
Without seeing a video, you can't tell it's on the ground.
Absolutely not.
But I would say it's probably half a mile wide.
Okay, so we talk about this. We have the warm inflow that comes in. We have the forward flank downdraft, which goes around and helps. Some of it can wrap around. We have that rear flank downdraft, which is coming from the middle layers, but as that air is cool, will sink down below. But one thing we can get is, in the right conditions, this flow along this line, that warm air will push under that cold air, and it will start a horizontal rotation right here, but then gets sucked into this, and this is called streamwise vorticity current. And you get a very enhanced amount of rotation going into that storm along with the wind speed that then enhances the entire storm. Now, the problem, we said, you can see it could be a tornado if there's debris on the ground, but it's not fully condensed. And in fact, what we have here, the same, just a slightly different view. The inner core of this is a half a mile wide. That's a big enough tornado by itself. But the actual outer circulation from this whole storm, from this rear flank gust front, is 2 miles wide, enough to be very dangerous. The point being is, if you're close enough to see it, that's close enough. You see all these people and they want to get so close. And this storm, this whole Skip Talbot has outstanding discussion of this. I believe this was in Iowa. And 2 sets of chasers got injured by this because they got caught by this big outer circulation and weren't expecting it. One of them was a set of young people trying to get away, but the road they were on, the power poles got knocked over, getting sucked into it. They were trapped by the power poles. Another guy was by himself, and he had half of a grain storage shed hit his car. So, in addition to these, then we have to look at forward flank couplets. We talked about how those can occlude and block. So this is as the tornadic path of the Greensburg tornado. Look at that. I mean, edge to edge covered the town. And I just found out in the last month that one of my coworkers at Carrollton, her husband was doing pipeline construction and in Greensburg that night, heard the tornado sirens, warnings, and he and a bunch of them got in their trucks and left. And 2 guys stayed because they didn't believe it, and both were injured, fairly seriously, but not life-threatening. Now, one thing, operators at the hospital in Truman who did our tornado warning said, well, what if it goes that way? I said, well, tornadoes, they're driven by this big storm. The storm is going that way. The tornado is not going to go that way. Well, look what happens when it died off. These are mile roads in Kansas. That thing makes almost a 2-mile diameter, 360-degree loop before it died off. But it did finally occlude. But notice what happened after the Greensburg tornado. We had one form slightly ahead and to the right. And another one ahead and to the right, ahead and to the right. So it's a very common sequence. And what happens is we've got the warm inflow. We have this rear flank downdraft. And normally this is our circulation. But at some point that may be so strong as to occlude that updraft right there. Remember we saw in that one picture where we had that comma head, the lowering in that comma head wasn't as pronounced. It was a little farther up. So what we can see is that this occlusion may reform typically ahead and a little to the right of the previous one. Now I bugged out of this. You can also have, I talked about right moving, and you can have cells that split. So you could have simultaneous tornado winds. That storm relative velocity picture we had 2 circulations on it. So this is why I bugged out. In that storm, once it got up to Maxville, there was a police officer that was in his patrol car spotting. His car was seriously damaged. He was flown to Wesley Medical Center in Wichita and passed away from it. And I was like, it's his home territory. He doesn't know how to keep safe. I don't know that I stood a chance. So I'm very careful. So I talked about how those storms can occlude and reform. This is a picture, a little clip from last year. And this is radar scope. And at radar scope, you can watch, if you pay up a little bit, you can watch 2 different views of the storm at the same time. So it has the standard base reflectivity and it has storm relative velocity. And we see right at this point, we definitely have a strong coupling. Okay. So we're going to play this. And what you're going to see is right about here, that couplet's going to degrade. It's going to fall apart. And then it's going to reform almost 10 miles away ahead and to the right. And I was watching this in real time because it was not far from where my sister lived. And so I was watching, but this was on Ryan Hall y'all's YouTube. And there's a storm chaser right there. And this was a high precip supercell. And this thing formed right on top of him. And you could kind of hear his voice that he realized he may have done something wrong. So we see it degrades, and then boom, right there, it reforms. So you always have to be aware of these storms reforming if they go away. So you got some awareness. What's your escape route? Well, understanding your location, having some good mapping, thinking about what the current storm is doing, whether there's training storms behind it, not just for additional supercells, but because of the flooding risk associated with those. What environmental hazards do you have? You don't want to be around tall structures that can get blown over, power lines and such. And one of the big problems with chasing or spotting is traffic. Typically, if I'm chasing, I pick what I call secondary targets. I don't find the biggest, baddest because there are way too many people. I chased with a friend, Scott, out in Northwest Kansas a couple decades ago. We picked a secondary storm and nothing happened. So I said, okay, we'll go where everybody else is. We pulled up to, like on that map, a couple of rural intersections, 2 gravel roads. We sat there for 5 minutes while Chasers went by on another gravel road. Now think about when you need to get out, can you get away because of the traffic? Also, best thing you want to do is go 90 degrees away from the direction of the storm, and generally back to the west is about the safest. So for APRS, when I'm in my truck and I run this at home, I use a very old piece of software called UI View 32. Very robust, but when the guy died 20 years ago, he insisted the software would be destroyed, so that's too bad because this does a whole lot. But one thing it has, it uses a mapping program called Precision Mapping. Now, Precision Mapping is out of business, but the maps still are there. The one thing I like about UI View 32 with Precision Mapping is it's a fully scalable map. I can zoom in or out, and the entire map is on my hard drive. So I don't have to download it. Some of the other APRS apps, you can get varying levels, but you have to download them. You have to zoom in, download again. And I've never been able to tell exactly what I have on my computer. And because I kind of count on APRS being on over radio and don't guarantee cell service, I like this. The other thing is I've not seen any map of any kind that will also show my location. I don't have it because I don't have my GPS on, but it would show my location. Look, I can see every road for 20 miles. Now that's situational awareness. I want to know what the road network looks like where I am going. I also have a bunch of DeLorme maps, which are the books about yay big that show all the roads, which also a good overview. Now, what's the worst part about chasing or spotting storms in Livingston County? Geographically speaking, the rivers. We have the Thompson, we have the Grand and the Meeting. So where can we cross the Grand River in Livingston County or near Livingston County? You can cross on the gravel road by Lock Springs. You can cross on 36, 65, and then at 139 down at Sumner. That's it. What about the Thompson? Well, 36, 190, and Trenton. So when we're trying to spot a storm that's moving north and east, it's real easy to get pinched in here so that you can be in a bad position, because also if you go down C Highway, it floods all the time. And if you get behind it, it's easy to get way behind it because you have to find your way through town or out 36 to catch up with it. So several times, Charlie's kind of been on the east side, I've been on the west side, and we've kind of tag teamed it, which is a very good approach. But you have to understand what that network looks like. I was chasing with Scott down in Oklahoma once. It was individual supercell, perfect day, tornadic. We were getting really close. I was going over these hills to north to catch up with it. I was driving. Scott, who is great with weather, is horrible with maps, which I didn't really know at the time, said, Scott, keep watching. Just make sure this gravel road we're on keeps going north, because I knew there was a river up there. Next thing I know, we pop over in a field. And by the time I found a way to cross the river, the storm was gone. So situational awareness also helps with success. So what is your safe zone? You've got an idea of where you can get out, but how do you not get in trouble in the first place? First is the only safe place to be is 180 degrees behind the storm track. You think it's predictable, but they're not really. You ideally would like to be in clear air. That reduces your risk of lightning, reduces the risk of forming over the top of you. That may not always be possible because we have the higher precipitation supercells here. You don't want to be in a traffic jam, and you want to watch for falling objects. Now, safe zone is where you should be. The safety zone is where do you go when escape is no longer an option. Now, think about all the debris that is tossed up by a real tornado. They are, even I who had understood them until I saw the video from the inside of the hospital at Joplin, I did not even myself conceptualize how much pulverization the tornado causes when it hits a structure. I hadn't thought about all these things turning to dust, all these things turning into spikes. I had that general concept, but I was really impressed. So there's two ways you can get injured. One is you become the flying object, or the objects impale you. Neither one has a good outcome. And your vehicle may not be safe, and overpasses certainly are not safe. Now, does anybody know the whole overpass not safe story? So back in the 1990s on the Kansas Turnpike, where in Butler County, which is actually where I first worked as an EMT, there was a KSNW, which is KSN was the NBC affiliate. was going along the turnpike, and there's a tornado going right along the turnpike. So they stopped along with another car with a man and his daughter or granddaughter. And they went up under in the overpass and got up under the girders, because these were steel beam girders with a concrete abutment. So there was a little place to hide. And they get the great video because the tornado came right up the turnpike, right over the bridge, and the guy got video of it coming and going. You ought to go find that, because one thing is that tornado is approaching. There's a bridge down there about half a mile away, and what looks like a little piece of plywood flipping around, that's actually a minivan. Now, the problem is then about 5 years later, when they had the big tornadoes in Oklahoma City, people were stopping to get up under the overpasses. Well, those are all concrete overpasses. There is no hiding place. And in fact, all those things do with the big piles of dirt for the approaches is create a wind tunnel that's even faster than the ambient winds are, which were more than bad enough. So what did the Weather Service say? If caught outside, find shelter in a ditch or remain in your vehicle and cover your head for protection. We saw what happened to that one police officer's vehicle. It could be really bad, but I don't know necessarily, is a ditch really the best place or not?
If you're caught outside and there's a tornado approaching in your car, the best advice, drive away from it.
If you can.
If you can, drive away from it.
But that's what I said. 180 degrees away from the direction, and preferably backwards if that doesn't take you into the storm. So you can't chase all the time. I do a lot of virtual spotting, so that keeps me, I'm always thinking about what is the situation, what would I be doing, where would I be going, what am I anticipating? And you can do this in real time because we've got real-time radar, right? You can listen to Broadcastify and listen to all kinds of amateur radio or public safety, being police or fire. And I was listening to a tornado outside of Little Rock several years back, and I was listening to the amateur radio on Echolink, and then I had Broadcastify listening to the Arkansas State Troopers. The amateur radio, and that was very professional, very calm, and the troopers were like off the wall. Not saying it's all like that, because it's probably the opposite sometimes, but I was really impressed with the difference. All kinds of streaming chasers now. Two websites really conglomerate a lot of the different chasers. Ryan Hall Y'all's one, and Max Velocity is another, where they'll pick up a whole bunch of chasers plus watch the storm. So you can do a whole lot of that. And now media also, local media will watch storms and chase them as well. Heck, Johnny Rollins will get up in his helicopter sometimes. So you can practice this a lot and practice decision making just without even leaving your house. So we're going to finish up with a case study. This is the El Reno tornado. Yukon starts the metropolitan Oklahoma City area. This is I-40 going east and west across Oklahoma. This is at one time frame where the tornado is right there. Each one of these dots is a spotter that's on Spotter Network. So they've taken the little course, the quiz, passed it, and they're on Spotter Network. I can pretty much assure you that there's about twice as many people out there, because there's half of them that aren't on Spotter Network that are chasing. No right or wrong about it, but just understand those little dots probably represent about half the people. So let's look at our environment. We've got a tornado that appears to be moving to the southeast, correct? Pretty good size at that point. Already an EF5 growing from almost nothing in the course of just 3 miles. Again, as in the Midwest, these are mile roads. So what are some of our limitations? Well, when you have an interstate, don't get on the interstate because there's only a few ways to get off, and it's very hard to turn around on. So stay away from interstates. Where can you cross the interstate? Not every interstate has an underpass or overpass from mile roads. We have the Canadian River to the south. The only place to cross the Canadian River was Reno Ranch Road and down here at US 81. I saw some reports that troopers weren't letting people cross Canadian River going either direction when the tornado was approaching, even to the south. I've tried to follow up and verify that, but it didn't happen. But look what happened. This tornado grew in size to over 2 miles wide, but then it turned to the left. We say strong tornadoes and storms typically turn to the right. This one turned to the left. So it was unpredictable, right? Well, it was only unpredictable in its predictability is that we don't know what storms are going to do. So anywhere ahead of a 180-degree line is probably not the best place to be. At this moment in time, look at all the chasers that are ahead of this storm. Not only did it make the turn and get wider suddenly, it got a lot faster. And we'll look at a couple comments about it.
The powerful EF3
So
tornado.
the Weather Channel had their chase team.
300 miles per hour.
Mike
quickly
Bettis.
grows to a staggering 2.6 miles wide and is heading right at Bettis and his team.
I think we have to go now in order to stay ahead of this and not get run over.
So he's on the north side.
Clouds keep forming, increasing the tornado's size.
That's stock
There's
footage.
violent tornado right now approaching Union City, south of.
So this is the fault right
They
here.
get into their car.
Hail
and speed
core over
south,
here.
But they're too late. The tornado is bearing down.
Let's go. Just keep it on if you can.
And there was a moment where once it got to the kind of the left side of our vehicle, then I realized we were going to be hit. And then you just feel this really sudden, violent wind hit you.
Hold on, brother.
Multiple vortices going around it.
Everybody just go. Just keep it on if you can. Keep going if you can. Everybody duck down. Everybody duck down.
Okay, they're rolling.
And then I just remember tumbling, violently smashing into the ground over and over again. You know, and I remember being weightless at one point and floating. And then I remember thinking to myself, I have to prepare for a hard landing. The next thing you know, boom, and we hit. We land
Almost
upside
20
down.
seconds of
And I
rolling.
thought to myself, oh my God, I'm alive. I could not believe it. I thought I was dead.
So here's the problem. He came in from the north. You never want to approach a supercell from the north because you're going to come what's called through the bear cage, which is that heavy hail component around the north side. So it's damaging. But the other thing is you may literally drive into the tornado. He had a little bit of a clear slot because I was watching this while it happened and watched that broadcast live. And they were in a little clear slot. But what did they do? They were headed south on US 81. They drove into that tornado. They could have gone to the right. They could have stayed where they were, or they could have gone to the left. But they tried to outrun it by getting ahead of it for TV. Now, I don't know if you boat or fly, but it also works in cars as you approach an intersection. If you're moving and there's an object that maintains the same directional clock relationship to you, as you continue to move, you're on a collision course for that, whether it's at 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock. If it stays there, you're on a collision course. If you go back and watch that video, that thing stays at about 2 o'clock the whole time. You know you're on a collision course. Plus, you have those little suction vortices, those multiple vortex tornado. Remember, however fast the tornado is spinning, if you see things spinning around it on the outside, those are going quite a bit faster and even more intense. So it was a really bad move, totally unpredictable. I frankly can't believe he didn't get more crap about their behavior than they did. But they weren't the only ones that had a problem. There were 4 storm chasers killed by that. 3 of them were in one vehicle, very well-known, renowned storm chaser, his son, and a partner, but they were in a very small car trying to drive away to the east while they were ahead of the storm. They just couldn't go fast enough because of the inflow and the ability of that car to move 3 people. What happened? Well, this thing abruptly changed directions. It rapidly enlarged a width of over 2.5 miles in only about 30 seconds. Unpredictable. Swift increase in forward speed from 20 to 55 miles an hour as it rounded that curve and started off to the northeast. Had the multiple vortices, and when we look back at what we talked about, that big tornado, the oh my God, a translucent outer circulation without full condensation that surrounded it and was also obscured by precipitation. You're close enough to see it, you're plenty close. These people all got real close, and then it all changed. So if you're behind the storm at 180 degrees anywhere, you would have been safe and had a way out of it. So one guy who does this a lot, Dan Robinson, said, okay, what does this change? I will no longer attempt intercepts of large or rain-wrapped tornadoes within 2 miles. There's no benefit to being close to a large wedge tornado that can come even close to balancing the risk. My strategy for very volatile parameter days will also be less aggressive and less close range.
All right, don't forget to download Fox Weather app and turn on those notifications.
Last spring, my chase in Iowa.
Continues to ramp up over the weekend. If you find yourself in danger, make sure you head to your tornado safe spot immediately. We'll continue to monitor.
Fox Weather picked that out.
Mainly across the Central Plains and the mid.
Did we get your autograph now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they had a tornado emergency for this. It was a PDF, hazard, radar confirmed. There were people all over it, but they knew what it was. Initially, they thought it was the widest tornado in Iowa history, but when they went back, it was only a mile wide. That's plenty big. Funny thing is, because there were no structures, it was like an EF1 or EF2. Just not much there.
And you mentioned that being a tornado emergency. That was one thing you didn't cover in your slide was a tornado emergency is issued. They're extremely rare. That means there is a confirmed large and extremely dangerous tornado approaching a population center. So if you see a tornado emergency, you know it is really bad, and we know it's really bad.
I'm going to hit the restroom. I'll be right back. You stopped your recording?
Just about. No, I'm still live.
Okay, you can stop it.
And by the way, there is a mesoscale discussion in effect.